The most successful traders who ever lived have something in common, and it's not what you think. It's not a strategy. It's not an indicator. It's not some gift for reading markets that you weren't born with. It's a moment, a specific, terrible moment that almost all of them live through. Usually early, usually alone, usually in silence, because it's not the kind of thing you tell anyone about. The moment they lost everything, not had a bad month. Everything. Savings. Borrowed money. Money that belonged to people who trusted them. The man who would later turn $30,000 into $80 million lost his entire stake. More than once, before he made a single dollar that stayed made. And here's the part that should stop you cold. If you've blown up an account, if you're staring at one right now, wondering what's wrong with you, you are standing in the exact spot they stood in. The question is what happens next. Because what happened next is the entire difference between them and everyone else. In the 1980s, a trader and author named Jack Schwager did something nobody had really done before. He sat down with the best traders in the world, the ones with audited track records so absurd they looked like typos, and he just asked them how they did it. The interviews became a book called Market Wizards, and almost 40 years later, traders still treat it like scripture. But here's what most people miss when they read it. They go looking for the setups, the systems, the secrets, and they skim right past the things Schwager himself couldn't stop noticing. Almost every single one of these legends failed first. Badly. Publicly. Sometimes repeatedly. And that creates a problem for you, the struggling trader that you probably don't even know you have. You are comparing your worst chapter to their final chapter. You see the $80 million in your $2,000 blown account, and you conclude you're missing something they had. You've got exactly backwards. They were missing something too, and the blow-up is where they found it. So let's kill the myth right now, the myth of the natural. The myth says great traders are born with discipline, with intuition, with ice in their veins. The myth says if you had what it takes, you'd know by now, and a destroyed account is the proof you don't. The interviews destroy that myth on almost every page. These men panicked. They revenge traded. They held losers until the losers took everything. One of them lost money for 10 straight years. 10 years. The blow-up didn't disqualify them. In a way I'm going to make very precise in this video, the blow-up is what qualified them. Not because losing is noble, because of what the loss forced them to finally see. By the end of this video, you'll know 3 of these stories in detail. Michael Marcus, Paul Tudor Jones, and Marty Schwartz. 3 different markets, 3 different personalities, 3 catastrophic failures. And underneath them, one identical pattern. The same lesson, learned the same brutal way, producing the same transformation. Then I'm going to show you how to extract that lesson without paying the full price they paid. Because here's the truth. The market charges tuition either way. The only question is the size of the bill. Let's start with the man Schwager put first in the book, because his story is the most extreme. Michael Marcus was a bright, academic kid, a psychology student on his way to a doctorate, when a friend introduced him to commodities trading with a pitch that should sound familiar. Easy money, fast. His first trades were guided by that friend, who claimed to know what he was doing. He didn't. The money was gone in weeks. Now pay attention to what Marcus did next, because this is the loop. The loop you may be living in right now. He didn't stop and ask what game he was actually playing. He concluded he just needed to try again with more conviction. So he scraped together more money and lost that. He kept going back. His savings went in, and then money that wasn't his. At one point, he was so certain about a position that he put in borrowed money, and a single report against him wiped it out in minutes. He described watching the market open against him and feeling his entire net worth, and more, evaporate while he just stood there. Think about that image. One of the greatest traders in recorded history, frozen, watching himself lose money he didn't have. And here's what makes his story worth studying instead of just wincing at. He kept blowing up because every failure produced the wrong lesson. After each loss, he concluded the problem was the trade. Wrong crop, wrong report, wrong tip, bad luck, bad timing. So the fix was always the next trade. Better information, more conviction. It never once occurred to him that the problem wasn't any single trade. The problem was that he was betting everything, every time. When you risk everything on every trade, your career doesn't depend on being good. It depends on never being wrong. And nobody, literally nobody in that book, nobody who has ever traded is never wrong. The mathematics are unforgiving. Bet it all repeatedly, and ruin isn't a risk. It's a schedule. What changed? Two things. And notice that neither one is a strategy. First, he hit a bottom deep enough that trying again the same way stopped being an option. The pain finally exceeded the fantasy. Second, and this is the part people skip, he found someone who traded in a way he'd never conceived of. He ended up around Ed Seykota, a systematic trend trader who was quietly compounding fortunes. And what shocked Marcus wasn't Seykota's entries. It was his relationship to losing. Seykota lost all the time. Small, planned, boring losses that meant nothing, that were simply the cost of finding the trades that went on to pay for everything. Losing wasn't the failure state. Losing was overhead, rent, a business expense budgeted in advance. Marcus rebuilt himself around that idea. He started risking small, defined slivers of his capital, so that no single trade, no single report, no single morning could ever again decide his fate. And on that foundation, only on that foundation, his genuine talent finally had somewhere to live. At Commodities Corporation, he turned an initial $30,000 into roughly $80 million. Same brain, same eyes, same market. The only thing that changed is that he stopped giving the market the power to kill him. Here's the principle, and I want you to hold it against your own account history. A trader who risks everything has no edge, because no edge survives a bet size that can take you to zero. Marcus didn't become brilliant in between his last blow-up and his first fortune. He became survivable. The brilliance was always there. It just kept getting executed before it could compound. Now let's talk about a different kind of blow-up. Marcus failed as a beginner. Paul Tudor Jones nearly destroyed himself as a winner. And that version of the story might be more dangerous for you, because it's the one that comes after you get good. By his early 20s, Jones was a rising star in the cotton pits. Confident, aggressive, and this is the important part, coming off a run of wins that had convinced him he was special. Then came the cotton trade. 1979, he built a massive position. Far too large, because size is what confidence does when nobody stops it. The market turned against him, and instead of taking the hit, he did what winners on a streak do. He defended the position. He was Paul Tudor Jones. The market would come back to him. It didn't. By the time he finally got out, he lost something like 60 to 70% of the equity in his accounts. On one idea, one trade. And what happened next is the part almost nobody talks about because it doesn't fit the legend. He was devastated. He described being depressed, questioning everything, seriously wondering whether he should quit, whether he was cut out for this at all. Read that again. Paul Tudor Jones, the man who would famously anticipate the 1987 crash and post one of the great years in trading history, sat in the wreckage of his account asking the exact question you've asked. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. So the failure feeling proves nothing about your future. It's what he built out of that feeling that separated him. Because Jones did something precise with his despair. He didn't vow to work harder or study more setups. He made a decision about identity. He decided that from that day on, he was not in the business of being right. He was in the business of defense. Protecting capital first, always, and letting offense be whatever the market allowed on top of that. Out of the cotton disaster came the rules he became famous for. Never average a losing position. Adding to losers is how one mistake becomes a catastrophe. Reduce size when you're trading badly. Increase it only when you're trading well. The opposite of what your emotions scream at you. Think of every trading day as starting from zero, so yesterday's profits can't subsidize today's ego. And the deepest one, The great traders, he realized, aren't the ones who make the most. They're the ones with an almost obsessive, boring, relentless focus on not losing. Here's the mechanism underneath his blow-up, and check yourself honestly against it. Winning streaks don't just grow your account. They grow your certainty faster than your skill. Every consecutive win quietly transfers authority from your rules to your feelings. By the fifth win, you're no longer trading your system. You're trading your self-image. And your self-image doesn't use stop losses. The cotton trade wasn't a market event. It was an ego event that happened to occur in the cotton market. The principle: your risk rules exist precisely for the moments when you're most convinced you don't need them. That conviction, that warm, certain, this one's different feeling isn't insight. In the market wizard stories, it shows up again and again as the final signal before disaster. The third story is the slowest and, for a lot of you, the most personal, because Marty Schwartz didn't blow up in one dramatic afternoon. He failed in slow motion. For a decade, Schwartz was, on paper, exactly who should win at this. Sharp analyst, elite education, marine corps discipline. He spent roughly 10 years around markets and lost. Not constantly, not catastrophically, worse. Almost winning year after year. Grinding, studying, working harder than everyone, and bleeding. 10 years. Sit with how long that is. That's long past the point where anyone would have told him, where anyone would tell you, to quit. And then he turned. And not gradually, dramatically. He became one of the most consistent traders in America, famously entering trading championships and winning them, compounding at rates that made professionals check the math. So what changed in year 10 that was missing in years 1 through 9? In his own telling, one thing, and it's an inside thing, not an outside thing. For 10 years, he needed his trades to prove he was smart. He was the brilliant analyst. His positions were his intellect made public. So when a trade went against him, he couldn't exit. Exiting meant the analysis was wrong, and the analysis was him. He'd fight the market to defend a thesis the way you defend your own name. The turn came when he finally separated those two things, being right and making money. He started asking himself a question that sounds trivial and is actually surgical. Do I want to be right, or do I want to be rich? Once the answer was settled, truly settled, in his body and not just his mouth, losing trades stopped being courtroom verdicts about his intelligence. They became inventory. Positions that weren't working got cut, instantly and without ceremony, because they were just positions. His intellect was never on trial again. Notice something about this story. Schwartz didn't get better information in year 10. He didn't find a new indicator. 10 years of accumulated skill was already inside him, trapped behind an ego structure that turned every exit into a confession. The moment the ego moved out of the way, a decade of skill came online at once. That's why the turn was so fast. The trader was already built. He just couldn't be accessed. If you've been at this for years and you're still bleeding, this story is the one to sit with. The question may not be whether you've learned enough. It may be whether what you've learned is being held hostage. 3 men. A beginner who bet everything and got erased. A hot hand who bet his self-image and got humbled. A brilliant grinder who bet his identity and got stuck for a decade. Different failures. Identical lesson. Look at what each of them actually changed. Marcus stopped letting any single trade decide his survival. Jones stopped letting any single trade express his ego. Schwartz stopped letting any single trade define his worth. None of them fixed their entries. All of them fixed their relationship to the loss. And Schwager himself, after interviewing all of them, after asking every one of these wizards what made them different, kept arriving at the same place. The common ground wasn't how they got into trades. Almost every interview turns, sooner or later, to risk, to cutting losses fast, to sizing positions small enough to be wrong many times, to protecting capital with a seriousness that borders on religious. Bruce Kovner said his advice to novices was to dramatically undertrade. Risk a fraction of what feels right. And to know where he was getting out before he got in, because that's the only moment you can still think clearly. Larry Hite capped his risk at around 1% of capital per trade and summed up the entire game in one thought. If you lose all your chips, you can't bet. That's the pattern hiding in plain sight across the whole book. The wizards are not people who learn how to win. They are people who made it structurally impossible for one loss or one bad week to take them out. And then their winning had time to show up. Your blow-up, the one you're ashamed of, it was the market presenting you the same curriculum it presented them. The only question, the only one that matters, is whether you extract the lesson or just pay the bill and re-enroll. So let's make this practical. 5 steps taken directly from how these traders rebuilt. 1. Write your tuition ledger. Take your worst losses, the blow-up, the disaster trades, and for each one, write down what it actually cost and what rule it taught. 1 line each. $3,200. Never add to a loser. $900. No position size so big I check it at 3 a.m. That money is only wasted if the lesson goes unwritten. This is how you convert shame into curriculum, and it changes how the memory sits in you. 2. Cap your risk per trade at 1% or less. Hite's number. If your account is $5,000, no trade gets to cost you more than $50. Yes, it will feel absurdly small. That feeling is the exact miscalibration that blew you up. You're not sizing for excitement. You're sizing so that being wrong 10 times in a row, which will happen, is an annoyance, not an ending. 3. Decide your exit before you enter. Every time, no exceptions. Kovner's rule. The moment before entry is the last moment you're objective. Once you're in, every tick recruits your ego. Write the exit down. If you can't say where the idea is proven wrong, you don't have a trade. You have a hope with a ticket attached. 4. After a losing streak, cut your size in half. After a big win, watch yourself hardest. Losses degrade your judgment through desperation. Wins degrade it through certainty. Jones learned to trade smallest when trading worst. And remember his cotton lesson. The most dangerous day of your trading life will feel like the most certain. 5. After every single trade, ask the Schwartz question. Was I trying to make money or trying to be right? Say it out loud. You'll be shocked how often the honest answer is the second one. The trade you held too long. Exited too early. Size too big. Every be right answer is your ego showing you exactly where it's still holding the wheel. Here's where we've traveled. You learned that the greatest traders ever interviewed were not naturals. That Michael Marcus blew up repeatedly, betting everything on every idea, and only became great when he made himself impossible to kill. That Paul Tudor Jones nearly ended his career at the peak of his confidence and rebuilt himself around defense instead of brilliance. That Marty Schwartz lost for 10 years, not for lack of skill, but because his ego turned every exit into a confession and transformed almost overnight when he separated being right from making money. You learned the pattern underneath all 3. They didn't fix their predictions. They fixed their relationship to loss. Through survivable sizing, pre-decided exits, and an identity that no single trade could touch. And you learned the 5 steps. The tuition ledger, the 1% cap, the exit decided before entry, half size after streaks, and the nightly question, money or ego. If you've blown up an account, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not disqualified. You are mid-story. You're standing at the exact chapter where Marcus stood broke, where Jones sat wondering if he should quit, where Schwartz was grinding through year 7 of 10. The failure didn't tell you who you are. What you build out of it will. If this changed how you see your own worst trade, hit the like button. Not for me. For the version of you that's been carrying that blow up as a verdict instead of a lesson. And drop a comment. Tell me which story is yours. Are you Marcus, betting too big to survive being wrong? Are you Jones, most dangerous to yourself right after winning? Or are you Schwartz, skilled and stuck, defending trades like they're your name? Name it. Naming it is the beginning of changing it. Subscribe if you want to go deeper. This channel exists to extract every lesson the world's greatest traders paid millions to learn, so you can pay less. Next time, the single most disturbing sentence in all of Market Wizards. Ed Seikota's claim that every trader, including the losing ones, is getting exactly what they want out of the market. It will change how you see every trade you've ever taken. The market charges tuition either way. Stop repeating the course. I'll see you in the next one.